Welcome to yet another lecture of the MOOCs course titled Web-Based Decision Support System for Engineers and Practitioners. This course, as you have already gone through it, that we are focusing more towards how decision support system can be applied for various business problems, especially from a practitioner standpoint, and how do we make decisions on the or about the unstructured decision making problems associated with businesses. And we have so far, just as a recap of what the modules have been covering, we have seen that if you look into the screen, we have seen that we have a DSS or the web based DSS as the central component, in which we told we were having 4 components as part of it. And the first component was what we call as the DBMS or the database management system. Then we talked about it was the what we call as MBMS, the model based management system. Then we talked about as a KBMS, knowledge based management system. And the last one we discussed was the UIMS, user interface management system. And the DBMS, we have already seen things like SQL, we have seen the database, and we have seen normalization, and we also seen what is MariaDB, etc., and how do we create databases, etc., as part of this. And the user interface management system, we have already seen aspects of HTML, okay, the UI, UX, what it is, and how do we design it, a UI and a kind of a thing. So, forms, etc., we have already seen that. And we have mentioned at some point of time that the model based management system will comprise of an application layer and building model libraries. Okay. So, there are multiple ways to do this, but for the purpose of this course, we are going to do mostly here as a part of a PHP, or it is a server side scripting language. That is what we are going to study at the part of it, and then the knowledge based management system we will study towards the end of it. And as mentioned earlier, so this lecture is all about is introduction to PHP, and the name PHP, okay, it's a very interesting name, because the name again, the first P stands for PHP again, and then the next is hypertext and the preprocessor. So, this is the PHP expansion. So, the PHP appearing it again in the expansion of the acronym, it is a very interesting way of look. We will talk about all these kind of things in this lecture. So, we are discussing specifically the PHP, how PHP is used as an application program, or how does it actually builds the application layer, and how does it also builds the model, how do you build the create the libraries of different decision models. So, today we have a brief introduction, then references to basic language, syntax, data types, etc., etc. Security and some features is what we will discuss today. So, originally if you think about it, the PHP started as the personal home page, 1994, this is the beginning. This is the initial avatar of PHP. Okay. And the aim of this was the aim at inception. Okay. What was the aim at the inception? A way to create dynamic web pages. So, this is the main interest at the time, because remember few things, HTML at that time created static web pages. Okay. So, once you create a web page, it is static, it means the page does not change, as per requirement. Whose requirement? The requirement can be of two types, it is either the user requirement or the application program requirement. Either of the requirement, the HTML page did not change, it remained the same. So, then the question was how to make these static pages, static HTML pages into a dynamic form. Okay, this was the fundamental question. From there, what actually created was that develop server side scripting language capable of creating HTML on the fly. So, this was the solution that was thought through. So, then that gave rise to PHP originally. Okay. That is how the PHP originated in this. Okay. So, if you think about it, that we wanted to bring the dynamic web pages, or we wanted to create dynamic web pages, but at that time or in 1994 and all, HTML resulted in what we call as static web pages. The web page content did not change. Once you create the web page, it remained. But the web page, there were certain times there are requirements, either the requirement by the user or by the application program to make the web page content change or dynamic. So, then the question arised was how to make these static HTML pages into a dynamic form or a dynamic page. And the solution developed was create a server side scripting language that is capable of creating HTML on the fly, or as the page is executed, it should create the HTML, and that is how the PHP came into picture. So, the 1994 it started as personal homepage, as you see in the web page. Then in 1997 the PHP 3, which is what the, so this is the forefather of all versions of PHP we see now, or versions of current PHPs. Okay, whether it's PHP 4, PHP 5, PHP whatever it is you talk about, it is all the PHP. So, that became what you call as hypertext preprocessor. So, the core of the PHP, which is called as a Zend engine, presently it is also a framework. Zend is also a framework. But the Zend engine is the one actually creates. Zend engine creates the HTML on fly or during execution. Okay. So, that is what we are talking about. So, the entire PHP code, the Zend engine was rewritten in 1997, and this naming of PHP, as I mentioned earlier, PHP, then the PHP appearing again, then hypertext preprocessor. This type of naming is known as recronym, okay, or what we call as recursive acronym. What is recursion? Recursion is a function calling itself, that is recursion. So, what is a recursive acronym? So, a acronym is a acronym that calls in itself. So, the PHP acronym calls it again. So, that is why it is called recursive acronym or acronym, or sometimes it is also known as recursive initialism. So, there are a couple of other examples also. So, GNU, okay, is an example of it. GNU is not Unix. Okay. So, this is another example of it. So, that kind of things is there. So, PHP is an example of this. So, you can see quite a lot of the things that came out of the MIT lab actually followed this. So, what does PHP do? So, the main characteristics. Okay. What are the main things? Number one, the first thing is it develops dynamic web pages. It builds the web pages that are on the fly, dynamic web pages or HTML. When we talk about web pages, we are specifically talking about HTML. Second thing is it does server side scripting. So, what does it actually happens is, if you think about it, what is the server side scripting? So, you have a, let us say it is a laptop, okay, and you have a client sitting on it, you are working on the laptop, and then there is a connection. So, somewhere here there is a, okay, a big server, okay, computer, okay, a big server connected to it. So, this is a server, and the server side scripting means the Zend engine of PHP, okay. The Zend engine is present in the web server, okay. So, the web server, which is a server side application, the Zend engine is present there. So, when the user accesses a particular web page, the web server parses it or uses the Zend engine to dynamically create the HTML and sends it back. So, the user request comes this way, and the, so this is the request comes in and the dynamic HTML goes back. That is what it is. Now, the third one is it is an interpreted language. So, there are two type of languages, you may remember this in your earlier stuff. One is compiled and another one is called as interpreted. Okay. So, PHP is an interpreted language. Interpreted languages mean it is interpreted one line at a time. So, it is like done at the time of execution, one line at a time. There is no compilation, absolutely no compilation going on. And then the fourth point is that it contains HTML or it can embed HTML in your code. That is the main part of it. And then the last part is it mostly follows C and Perl syntax. C and Perl are two languages, but C is a compiled language, okay, and Perl is an interpreted language. Okay. So, it follows the syntax of both of these, but it is in reality it is an interpreted language. So, I hope you guys have a reasonably okay idea about this. So, now let us move forward. So, what are some of the specifics of PHP? What are some of the specialities associated with PHP? So, as I said earlier, you have a client laptop, okay, client computer, let us use a laptop, and then there is a, it is connected to a server. This is a computer server. The server has lot of things residing on it. It may have a DBMS, it have a web server, it have a access server, etc. Many aspects it will have. So, among the web server, it will also include PHP capabilities, which is realized by the Zend engine. So, what happens is when the user sends a request, then the code, the PHP code gets executed on the server. So, PHP code is executed, PHP code execution is on the server. It gets executed on the server, and what happens is as part of the execution it generates HTML. So, that process is called parsing. So, the PHP code gets parsed to generate HTML. So, then this HTML is sent to the client machine. The generated HTML at the server side is sent to the client machine. So, the request from the client goes to the server and the generated HTML is sent back to the client machine. And what happens is that the client gets to see the, so the client sees only the resulting HTML, okay. The underlying PHP code, okay, that PHP code is hidden to the client. The client never gets to see the PHP code. So, the logic of how the web page is created is hidden from the client. So, what are major purposes or major uses of PHP? Number one is it is used in server side scripting. So, specifically create dynamic HTML pages, create server side application, okay, interconnect DBMS to UI. So, those kind of etc. All these are part of the server side aspects of PHP. You can also do command line scripting, which means you can write a command line program. So, it is like writing a command line program. It is a .php program and can be executed using the PHP. That is also doable. This will be an interpreted program, interpreted by Zend engine. Okay. And then writing desktop applications. You can also write standalone desktop applications. Okay. That is also a third part of the PHP. But the most important thing is most of the web servers, okay, that is available in the world now, they all support PHP. So, what is a web server? So, this question is obviously web server, this keyword. Okay. We talked about this web server here also. What is it? Okay. That is our next question. So, what is a web server? The simplest answer to it is it is a computer program. Web server is a computer program. And what does it does? The two things, it accepts HTTP requests. HTTP request is HTTP, okay, stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Okay. So, if you see a web address, it will say http://www.google.com. Okay. This is the request. Okay. So, this means this is the user request to see Google web page. Okay. You type it on the, so where does this gets created? Okay. So, the request is typed on a browser of the client machine. Could be Internet Explorer, it could be up. So, what is a browser? Okay, web browser. It can be Firefox, it can be this one, what is called Chrome, Internet Explorer, etc. Okay. They are all browsers. So, this request is created in the browser, and then this request, second thing is gets transferred through internet until it reaches the server. How does it reach? Using IP address that contains the code, the PHP code of the requested web page. Okay, that is what happens. Then what happens? So, once this is done, the HTTP request, it serves the HTTP request, it says show me the Google page, and what it does is it creates the, so serves the HTTP request means generates resulting HTML code. Okay. And if there is an optional data, if there is another data that need to be fetched, then the system will fetch that data and send it back. So, as of now, the major web servers, okay, that are present in the world and their market share as follows. Apache, this is the open source, okay, the free software foundation one, which is mostly majority 52, now it is 55% or something. Some people also call it as Tomcat as well. So, it is another word, actually it is a simpler version of it, Apache Tomcat. People call it Apache Tomcat either way. So, that is the majority is with them. Second one is IIS, which is a proprietary. Okay, this is not an open source, this is licensed software. Yeah, Microsoft creates it. It's Internet Information System. IIS stands for Internet Information System. It's the second most popular, but the popularity is now somewhere in about 30% or something like that. And then there is GWS, Google Web Server. Is about 6 to 8% is now this one. And then there is another one, Nginx. Google Web Server, this is also is free but not open source. Free but not open source. Okay. And then Nginx is a minor 2%. Okay. So, in our discussion mostly when what we do in this class is we are focusing on Apache plus PHP 5 is will consider as the standard, or our we assume that this configuration is available for us, and then we build applications accordingly. Now, why we choose PHP 5? Okay. Why PHP 5? This is an interesting question for us, because the two different types of programming styles. There are multiple programming styles. Many people have so many, depending upon whom you follow, you will see different. I broadly take three things. One is called as the procedural programming. Okay. Second one is what you call as the functional programming, and the third one is called as the object oriented programming. As far as I am concerned, these three are fine with me. There is some distinction between procedural and functional. I would like to distinguish them. The procedural programming is very commonly, you can think about languages like COBOL or BASIC and all, they are good in and they have a go-to kind of an usage also. Functional programming is where you write the logic as multiple functions. And call them in a specific order. Okay. So, that is the functional programming. So, object oriented programming is data plus methods combined. Okay. So, both the data and the method or manipulation, methods means how to manipulate, both are part of the object oriented programming. The PHP 5 allows both styles, object oriented programming and functional programming. I wrote procedural programming because it also supports procedural programming. So, all sort of programming, the three major programming styles that I am more worried about, it is supported by the PHP 5. Second one is it supports a wide range of database management systems. Okay. And this is critical for developing DSS. What are the wide range of DBMSs that we support? Okay. It supports MySQL, MariaDB, it supports Postgres or PostgreSQL, it supports DBase, Oracle. Even it, to an extent, it supports even what we call as Microsoft Access. This also happens, etc. Okay. The wide variety of database management support embedded into PHP makes it a very favorite choice of the people who are developing DSS or decision support system. Then third capability is it can generate images, PDF files and flash movies, etc. on the fly. So, this is built-in functions or canned operations, packages available. So, you do not have to write a specific code for this anymore. All this is already built in. You just have to call that operation or the package and say, I want to create this particular PDF file, and PHP will create it for you. And it also can process capabilities to process text or XML documents. Okay. Or the XML stands for extended markup language. So, textual data processing capability. That is also another important aspect of PHP 5. Because of all these kind of reasons, because it can support the object oriented programming, it can support the functional programming, it can support the procedural programming, it supports wide varieties of DBMS, database management systems, it can create images, PDF files, flash movies, etc. in a fly, because all these things are built in as a package. You do not write the code, it is available, and it can also do textual data processing. All these aspects which are very, very critical for the decision support system is readily available with PHP, and especially in enhanced mode in PHP 5. So, we focus on PHP 5 or higher versions of it. So, it for us to design the web based decision support system. So, what is the basic scripting structure, or how is the basic PHP program? So, PHP program is also known as PHP script. We are telling it as a PHP script. The reason why we call it as a script, because it is a interpreted language, line by line execution. Just like a movie script, you go line by line by line. That is why it is called a PHP script. Okay. Now, the basic structure is, it is enclosed within two tags. So, an opening tag and a closing tag. So, opening tag is a less than sign, a question mark, and without any space PHP. So, this when this tag is encountered, web server invokes Zend engine for parsing PHP code. Okay. As soon as the PHP tag, this less than or equal to sign, question mark, and PHP comes across, this tag, when it is encountered, the web server, whether it is IIS, whether it is Apache, whether it is GWS, it does not matter, they invoke the Zend engine, and that Zend engine parses the PHP code. And how long it will continue to parse? So, you have PHP code like this, and at some place you will have a closing tag, another question mark, and a greater than sign. This tells the web server to close the parsing. So, that is what the web server does. So, how does the web server know? The intermediary is the web browser. So, through the web browser, which are the web browsers? Firefox, Internet Explorer, Chrome, etc. Okay, they are the web browsers. Okay. Through the web browser, this web browser sends request to web server. So, where is the web server residing? It is residing on the computer server, and then it parses using Zend engine and then sends the code back to the client or the web browser, which displays it. And the PHP script files, these files can be in two formats. There is two approved formats for this. You can with a .html extension or a .php extension. So, if I can say that hello.html, I can put PHP in this, or I can create a file called hello.php and then put the PHP file in that, or PHP code in that. But also remember, lot of the time people have this, or when the people creating this application, they create this .php files using word processors or notepad. Word processor, typically what I am talking about is Microsoft Word, and it can create an issue. Usually the code may not parse, purely because of the fact that the issue of carriage return. Okay. The way in which the enter when you for a new line, how word processor handles new line is an issue for the, especially word processor and notepad can create an issue for your Zend engine. So, hence we recommend you to use, if you are writing the PHP file, think about this open ID, this is an ID, integrated development environment, PHP Designer 2007, it is free, it is easily available in the website, in the internet, you can download it and write code accordingly using this one, right. So, this will prevent the issue of the carriage return when you are trying to learn the PHP code. So, that is the basic PHP structure. So, let us create the first PHP program, and once we go through this, you may have a good idea. So, first name the file as first_php.html. So, as I remember, we can elaborate this file. So, the content of the file is the first line is HTML, then body, and there is this statement, okay, PHP. So, this tells the web server to parse, and then it goes to HTML. So, now let me elaborate this script. Okay, let us elaborate this. So, HTML, the minute you see this, browser starts to parse the HTML. It basically converts, it is a markup language. Remember, HTML is a markup language. Now, the other part of the HTML is head. Okay. You can, there is a head in which let us call it as title, my first PHP page slash title slash title slash head. Okay. So, this finishes the header portion. Then we have what we call as the body. So, then somewhere within this is the slash body. So, the PHP scripts goes in the body portion. So, you can write here is H1 my first PHP scripted page or something like this slash H1. So, that will show up as a heading 1. Then I write it as PHP, or you can write it as lowercase also. The minute this is this, up to this point, the web browser was doing it in the client machine. Okay, up to this point, the web browser was doing it in the client machine. Below this, it will invoke Zend at the server side. Okay. So, in the PHP, we will say that use the keyword called echo. Okay. Echo stands for print. Okay, that is what it says, display onto the CRT what it is, and within double quotes, this is my first PHP script output or something like this. Okay. Okay. So, this echo means it just displays it on the screen, and then you do this. So, this up to this much, this is where the server side parsing happens, and then what we do is we say slash body. That means the body component of the HTML part is over, and slash HTML, the entire HTML code is also over. So, this kind of an approach where you are integrating or embedding PHP script in the HTML file. So, this is one way of programming. You in the HTML file itself, you can create a PHP script by giving this PHP opening and closing tag. But remember, every PHP code line ends with a semicolon. So, this is critical. end of PHP code line. Every line should be done with the semicolon except comments. Comments lines should not be done with the help of a semicolon. So, that is the other aspect. So, this whole file, this entire thing can be saved as an HTML file. And when you open this HTML file, so let us say you put it on some server. So, you will write it as http://www.mywebserver.com/first-php.html. The minute you do this, assume that this file is saved in the root directory, then this will be taken, the web browser will show you and print this heading will be shown, this will also be shown, and that will be the end of the program. So, this gives you an idea of how to create the first PHP program. We will take a short break here and then we will do the next portion, continue with the more complicated programs, PHP programs in the next session. Thank you.